Ready? All right, welcome. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's the Genesee County Compassion Club Show. My name's Jeremy. I'm your host today. Back in the studio here at All Points TV with my man John, who's behind the cam. John, what's up?
I'm actually to the side of the cam.
He's actually over there.
Yeah. Anyway.
Looks funny when you're watching it, John. Trust me.
I know we reversed it, but it makes it better this way.
Anyways, glad that you're with us today. We're going to bring you some news, let you know what's happening around Michigan with medical marijuana, let you know what's happening down at the Genesee County Compassion Club, and basically talk some trash, man. Ready? No, I'm just kidding.
We're going to trash, man. The lawsuits, yeah.
No trash talking on the show. None at all. No, actually, I got some cool stuff going on that I definitely want to talk about. Man, I know everybody right now is just super pumped, super geeked about this upcoming weekend's High Times Cannabis Cup event out in Mount Morris, Clio area at the Auto City Speedway. It's going to be a huge event. I know that there's a lot of people at the club that are involved in this, and they're going to be rocking it. I mean, it's going to be well represented at the G3C will be well represented at the Cup, I'm sure. And man, I mean, this is going to be a big event. Last year was a huge turnout. It was the first time that they had it here in Michigan. All went well. There was no issues. There was no problems at all. And this year it's going to be even bigger. So I heard there's like over 200 vendors. And I'm hoping they have some excellent weather out there this weekend, and I'm wishing everybody the best of luck. It's going to be sweet. So I wanted to talk about that first on the show today because I know it's on everybody's minds, and it's going to be fantastic, I'm sure. I was reading in a High Times, actually I think it was in a different publication. It wasn't High Times, but they were interviewing High Times people, and they said, Michigan was their absolute favorite place that they had put a show on at. In this particular interview. So that was pretty cool to hear that, and I'm sure it was because of all the groovy people that we have here in Michigan. But anyway, that's awesome. So kudos to you guys. Rock it out this weekend. Have fun and be safe and represent. All right. What else we got going on? We've got at the G3C, we've got obviously we've got a soup kitchen coming up here at the end of the month. Just want to put out a quick reminder about that, let everybody know what's going down. Other than that, I mean, it's a beautiful day. You guys got to get out there. We got the storms coming in here right now, so take cover. Make sure you're buttoned down. I know everybody's got their outdoor crops going on, and you might want to make sure they're staked or whatever it is that you got to do out there. Speaking of outdoor stuff, we do have our upcoming event here coming up this fall, Outdoorfest. Make sure you tell all those outdoor growers out there when you see them, and they come in from the field, let them know. There's going to be a big contest going down at the end of October called Outdoorfest, and it's going down at the G3C. We want to see who's got the biggest stalk, who's got the biggest buds. There's going to be all kinds of groovy stuff.
Okay, in Michigan, though, somebody growing outside, which is not as common as probably other states like California.
It's catching on.
Yeah, it is, but okay, would you have to start the plants like you do like any other kind of garden variety kind of garden thing?
You don't have to, John, but it certainly would be advantageous to start your plant, indoors and then move it out, like right around Memorial Day, like you do for most crops. They're obviously sensitive to frost. You don't want them to freeze, and it doesn't matter if it's a little baby or a full-grown plant. Either way, frost isn't good for them. So, but anyway, yeah, I mean, it's certainly advantageous to end up with a lot larger plant. That's for sure. I know a lot of folks are doing the other end of the spectrum when it comes to harvest time, is that they're forcing their plant to start flowering sooner than it would if they just went with the sun's cycle. And you can do this by covering your plants up early in the mornings or late at night and just cutting out a few of those remaining hours of sunlight. Maybe you could use some type of a cloth or some type of a cover if you're in a greenhouse or other types of ways to figure this out. But you can force those plants to go into that flowering stage sooner, and that can be really helpful. There's quite a few strains that don't like to flower until later on in the year, or maybe they have a really lengthy flowering process, and so they're not really a good strain to do in this part of the country in the northern hemisphere. You could still grow it successfully here in Michigan, but you're going to have to force flower a little sooner. And actually, right now is the time to start thinking about that. If you've got some sativa strains out there in your outdoor garden, and you're kind of worried about being able to get those, completed, have them, to their full ripeness that they need to be at when it comes time to harvest, and you're fighting against that weather like we always are. Now's the time to go ahead and start getting that set up, if you will, if you can, and getting yourself prepared to start force flowering those plants a little sooner. I've seen people use a lot of different methods. Like you see these types of covers that they use on the sides of RVs, pool covers, large tarps. There's a number of different ways that you can do this, and you got to be creative. Obviously, it's probably going to be a large area that you're working with, and you don't want anything, resting on top of your plants. That's for sure. But this is something, like I said, that I know a lot of folks are starting to think about. I've seen a couple people put it into action with success, and I think it's something that here in Michigan should be utilized, especially, like I said, for the sativa type strains. Indicas, usually they flower a little faster, so you can get away with just using the natural sun periods to ripen up your fruit, if you will, and still be able to harvest it before the first hard frost comes in.
Okay, another thing is too, like the plants behind you in that picture we got there.
Yeah.
Okay, so could something that big grow in Michigan, or if you possibly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen some monsters. So when we have the Outduperfest contest at the end of October, I expect to see some mammoth plants. I imagine we're going to see stalks, bigger than your arm, John. No doubt, bigger around than your arms. So, and John's a big guy.
What could they do with it? I think they probably can make those stalks into like furniture or something.
There's an amazing amount of things that you can do with those stalks, because essentially that's the same fibers you would get out of the industrial hemp plant. If we're just talking about the stalks or the hard stem portion of the cannabis sativa plant, so yeah, there's a lot of stuff you could do with it, John.
Because I remember you brought in a section of stem off one of your plants that you dried out.
Yeah.
That was solid. I mean, I was like saying, this is almost like bamboo.
Yeah, once they harden or dry out, I should say, they do harden, and it's amazing the rigidity and strength that they have. It's a extremely durable material. That's why it was used, for hundreds of years until basically, we came up with nylon.
Well, see,
DuPont.
The Philippine Islands, they use that martial art called arnis, and they use a stick from rattan. And that put me in mind of rattan. Yeah, it was fibrous. It had like a hard shell on the outside. You could see the fibers on the inside. It was a lot like that.
Oh yeah, cool. Speaking of plant stuff, I have a couple items sitting out here on the desk, as you may notice. And on my journeys around the grow stores in Genesee County, I like to try to hit them all. Today I was at two guys in a grow shop over there on Bristol Road. They always take good care of us at the club, and I try to, like I said, go to all of them really if I can, but they were just ones I happened to visit today, and I needed a tank heater. I don't do hydro anymore, but I still have to water my garden, and when I'm mixing up my water from my RO unit, I've got a reservoir that clean water is going into where I'm collecting it, and it comes out of the tap at 55 degrees. Most of the time your water, if you've got a well, is going to come out of the ground at about that temp, 55 Fahrenheit. And, out of the city, John, does it come out any different? Is it still 55 out of your city tap?
Yeah, along with some bizarre colors and odors, but yeah.
Okay.
Well, about 55, yeah. It's like, and sometimes, obviously, let it run a little bit, it gets colder.
Well, 55 is probably about as cold as it's going to get, but when it first comes out, it's probably a little bit warmer. It might be like 62 or...
Artesian wells, I'll tell you what, like that water, it might be just in the 50s, but it seems like really cold, artesian well.
Yeah, artesian wells, they're also 55, believe it or not. It's just that they're getting that fresh source there, and they don't have a bunch of pipes to go through that are warming them up. But at any rate, 55 degrees, that's cold. I mean, imagine taking a bath in 55-degree water. I mean, I know that they were talking about Lake Michigan temps this year being around that, and, you go out in that water, it's cold. So, if you're watering your plant with that same temp, think about that. Your plant doesn't like it. What temps do your plants like? They like the same temp that the air temp should be, which is about 75. And that's what's most comfortable to your cannabis plants, and it's also what's most comfortable to your cannabis plants' roots. So when you're watering, think about that. You're changing the temperature of the rhizome, that entire root area, and the medium that surrounds it. So one of the things that you're doing if you're not warming up your water to that 70-degree range is that you're shocking it. Believe it or not, you are shocking your plant, just like if you stepped in a cold shower, except when you do that to your plant, it actually is going to retard some of the growth. So you can help improve your plant's growth simply by adding one of these suckers right here. You can find them at most grow stores. I was at a different grow store today, I won't say which one, but they didn't have it in stock, and they were like, yeah, we don't get too many people asking for these. And I was like, really? You're kidding me, because these things really only last about 3 months. For the most part, they're pretty much junk. But they are a necessity. I mean, or at least I think they are. I mean, I wouldn't not have one in the garden. So
that's what like aquarium heater looks like.
All it is the same thing that people have been using in their fish tanks for years. I mean, you can get these at Magoo's or Myers or wherever. or support your local grocery store, get it there. And but yeah, I mean, and what's the proper temp? I mean, 70-degree range is what I said. 75 really has been proven scientifically to be pretty much the perfect temperature for your plants. So, I mean, you may say one strain responds a little bit differently to, temps, maybe likes a little bit warmer or whatever. I mean, okay, fine, there may be a little bit of variances there, but if you're between 72 and 77 degrees, you're in that sweet spot, and that's going to help your plant out. That's all I got to say.
Okay, so. Exposure to warmer temperatures, would that increase the chemical content of particular plants, or maybe cooler temperatures?
It does a number of things when you increase heat to water. The first thing that it does is it gets rid of some of the oxygen that's in that water. So you're depleting some of the oxygen content there, and that, number one, is not a good thing. The other thing that typically happens when you use warmer water is that you are using your water heater, and your water heater is loaded with typically with years of deposits, from the water itself, from the tank that's breaking down, so on and so forth. So that, by right, deposits a lot more minerals into your water, and you end up with having an unbalanced EC or ppm.
You ever see those heat on demand, basically, for the tanks?
Yeah, the on-demand heat.
Yeah, they're tankless. Yeah, they're tankless water.
That there you could probably get away with and not be actually adding in a mineral content into your water source. But you're still taking out oxygen, and that's something that you don't want to do. And when you're just pouring it out of the tap, and you may be sticking your finger in there and you're just guessing, your finger, believe it or not, is probably not as accurate as a thermometer. So it's a good idea just to go and measure that, make sure you're in the range, and make sure that your equipment's functioning. If you happen to make a mistake and your water is now, maybe it's not heated at all, and it's 55 degrees, it's not that it's going to hurt your plant, but it does shock it, and it's going to slow the growth down in comparison to if you used the appropriate temperature water. So, all right, enough about the water here. Definitely recommend using one of these. Other products I want to talk a little bit about today, and this is something that comes up often when us growers are talking about products, and what do you use outside of your normal A, B, and C mineral intake. So when we're not talking about our regular nutrient base, and I know that a lot of you folks out there have your own pickings on what you want to use for your base nutrients. We've got the general hydroponics, the ionic, we've got advanced and Canna, and all of those, and those are all fantastic products. But what do you want to add into your mix after you've completed your basic mineral mix? What are the other things that you could add into your watering or feeding cycle, as you may call it, that are going to help increase that plant's overall health? And I know that a lot of folks think that the best way to improve your plant's health is by simply increasing its cannabinoid content. So, we're talking about where did it test at? Well, it came in at 17%, and hopefully next time I'll do a better job, and it comes in at 20%. So, what can we add into our mineral mix or our watering mix to help it get to that? That's a tough thing to say, because when you're really getting down to improving the overall plant's health, obviously the cannabinoid content is going to be a direct reflecting factor of the plant's health. But what is the exact thing that's going to make or break that plant to make it better or worse than the next one is really going to be dependent on a lot of the different variable conditions inside of that environment, including the mineral mix and the environment. And when I mean environment, I mean like the air temperature, the amount of humidity that's in the air, and some other key factors like humidity and so forth. But again, let's get back to the conversation here. We're talking about what can you add into your watering mix outside of your minerals that's going to help improve your plant's health. This is a product here that I use regularly, and it's Green Fuse. It's made by Hydrodynamics International, same company that makes Ionics. It's a Michigan-based company, and I've been using this stuff for a while. But this is called Growth Stimulant. This one's called Bloom Stimulant, and there's another one out there that's yellow label, and that's a Clone Stimulant. These here are not mineral type additives. So, if you add this into your watering when you're going ahead and feeding your plants, it is not going to raise the EC or the ppm. What this is going to do, hopefully, is going to help improve your overall plant's health and its ability to produce its own resins, which ultimately that's where the cannabinoids are at. So in those resins are some other things beyond cannabinoids, like terpenes, things that are going to make it smell and taste good, and we want to figure out how we can improve that as well. So really, when we're talking about how do you improve your plant, we're talking about more than just the cannabinoid content. We're talking about, how does it look, meaning, what is the trichome development there? Can you see those crystals? We're also obviously going to be, concerned with its cannabinoid content. Did that improve? And then the other thing that we're going to be definitely concerned with is how does it taste? How does it smell? And that's going to be really dependent upon the plant's ability to produce its own terpenes. The terpenes that are in the plant come from the same place that the cannabinoids come from, and that's that plant's resin, those trichomes, those little bulbs of crystals that we're looking for on those leaves. And so really, when we talk about improving the plant's health, we're talking about how do we get it to produce more of those beautiful little crystal balls of trichomes. And this is one of those products that I use personally to do that. What this is it contains its own plant oils. So there's plant oils in this, and I'm trying to use it to get my plant to produce its own plant oils, essentially. So, I don't know, a little bit of common sense behind that. It's got some other goodies in there too, which I couldn't tell you because I'm not a scientist. But at any rate, this stuff here works. It's not cheap, but it does help out quite a bit. And you can use it, like I said, you've got the bloom additive. You've also got the bloom additive. These are not things that you need to use all the time. This is something that you might use once every 10 to 14 days in your garden. So a little goes a long ways. When I put this in my water, I use an eyedropper because it's milliliters that you're using per gallon. And I think the product recommends 3 to 5 milliliters per gallon. You definitely want to read the instructions for yourself. And usually what I say when you're starting out with any new product is start out with less than what the directions say, and then eventually work up to what the directions are recommending. And that way you make sure you don't injure your garden or hurt anything. But these types of products here, you're not going to be able to burn your plants with it. Like I said, it doesn't affect your EC or your ppms. And I have a lot of people ask, well, how do you get your buds to taste good, or how do you get it to taste better? This stuff here, stuff like this, definitely helps. One of the people I was talking with recently was talking about a product that I used to use, which is called Sweet. And not saying anything bad about the product, but I think that when we're talking about, again, improving the plant's health, we want the plant to produce more of what it naturally produces. So if I'm trying to get the plant to taste sweeter, well, what if that plant isn't something that should naturally taste sweet? What if I don't want a sweet taste? So you have to kind of think of it that way. I'd rather have a plant that's going to produce what it's naturally capable of than trying to get it to produce something that it's not naturally gifted to doing. And so if you want a sweet plant, go grow a watermelon. You know what I mean? Anyway, just a couple of product plugs out there I wanted to put out there, and also have a little conversation about how do you improve your plant's health. I mean, number one, it's environment. You've got to have a good environment for your plant. All right, moving on here. I got a couple other things I want to share with you today. There's been some news, and if you go to MLive on the internet or whatever, go read the paper. There's an article in there about a new bill that was introduced here in the Michigan State Legislature. It's House Bill, let me get this right, 48, let me see here, hold on. It's a long bill, get to the numbers here. 4209, that's one of them. We've talked about that one before. This one is 4827. So you can look these up if you want. Just go to michiganlegislature.gov. So we got 4209 and 4827. So 4827 is the new one that was just introduced today. Excuse me. And 4209 is the one that we've talked about before, which is for the provisioning centers. These two bills are T-barred or tie-barred. Not exactly sure if I'm saying that right. But what it basically means is that the one bill can't pass without the other. So in other words, if this bill doesn't pass, then this bill can't pass. And if this bill does pass, in order for it to go into law, this bill also has to pass. So they got to go together. It's a package. All right. So the first part of the package we've talked about extensively before, and they've actually just placed on the internet. You can read for yourself the new summary for House Bill 4209, which is the Provisioning Centers Act. So if you want to go look at all the different changes that they've implemented into that and what's now being discussed at your state legislature, go to michiganlegislature.gov, type in House Bill 4209 in the search box, and click on the HTML thing there, or the Adobe Reader file for the most recent House summary for House Bill 4209. And that's what I'm looking at right now. And it does go through, basically states that local municipalities have the ability to license centers They'd also have the ability to license safety compliance facilities. They would be able to license cannabis transport businesses, commercial growers, and also, let's see what else I see on here. Oh, testing facilities. So it gives the local authorities the ability to license these types of businesses, and then it goes on to establish a state board that would further hand down rules and processes that these businesses would have to make sure they attend to. It goes through the fees that are established for applications. It goes through time limits and when things can be submitted, when boards have to be formed, so on and so forth. And it goes on to also say that it is parallel to the current patient and caregiver system. So what this should mean currently is that if these bills were to pass, that they should not affect the current patient and caregiver system. I'm a little skeptical of that myself, but that's what the bills say.
Yeah,
so that's what they go with.
I can see right at the top. If it's up to the local people, to local leadership, it's just opening it up, I think, to corruption, whatever, politicization.
It's going to throw up some. It's going to throw up some issues and stuff that's going to definitely have to be worked out with. And as the trade and the industry grows here in Michigan, there's going to be stuff that's going to have to get worked out. You know what I mean? It's just going to have to be. The idea is that we can work these things out without doing it, in front of a judge. You know what I mean? These things can be discussed, handled, and set forth accordingly prior to all of that, and now is the time to do that. So anyway, this is one of the things that they're trying to propose, and there's time for input. So you want to make sure you give your input. To give you an example, the grower's license, there's 3 different classes that can be that could exist. Class A would be 0 to 500 plants. Class B is above 500 to 1,000, and Class C is 1,000 to 1,500 plants. So when we're talking about a grower's license, we're not talking about current caregivers. We're talking about a new type of entity that would have to be licensed by the local municipality and the state, and then would receive, said class of license according to whatever plan it is that they're applying for. So these are definitely proposals. This bill is definitely a proposal to, I would say, allow businesses into the medical marijuana program. It definitely is setting forth a precedent, and I guess the one thing that I really don't care for is how every single part of the cannabis process in this bill is broken down into a separate type of business. For example, you've got growers being one type of entity. You've got testers being another. You've got distribution centers being another type of entity. You've got people who transport the cannabis from the grower's facility to the distribution center, the transporters themselves being another entity in this bill. And in fact, in this bill, it specifies that if you are one of these types of businesses, that you cannot have more than a 10% stake in another one of these types of related businesses. So, for example, right now, where the G3C is essentially involved in a couple different aspects, where we've got the lab and we've got the members, that could be perceived as, a potential thing where you've got 2 different entities. Now, the way the club operates, we don't really fall into these categories because we're still operating under the original law, and there is a section in these proposed bills here which states that it does not affect not only the current patient and caregiver model, but that it also doesn't affect the current protections in the Section 8 provision of our medical marijuana law. So there's a specific outlay for those protections in these new bills. But at any rate, it definitely is making it cumbersome on the industry by splitting it up so severely and then not allowing these businesses to be, in a sense, be the same business. It's all got to be different. So, in a way that could be good because you're going to spawn off a whole bunch of new businesses, right? So that's a good thing. The bad part about that is that the cost for all those new businesses is going to get boiled back down to the consumer, which ultimately, in this case, are patients. So really what we're doing is we're going to be, possibly doubling or tripling the cost of medication through this type of legislation, to our patients. And you got to remember, our patients, they're using this as medication, folks. It's not just out for profit. It's not just a recreational thing. It's not just a, oh, if I feel like it kind of deal. There's people out there that depend on this, that need it. And it sounds good on paper, but when you add it up at the end of the day, it's going to make, a gram to a patient be $25, $30 or more. And, when you add in all these different businesses and then require that it's tested, licensed, tracked, because that's part of the next thing we're going to talk about, it is definitely going to add on a cost to the product. And it's not going to be at the hands of the people that are doing the work. Because, let's face it, nobody does anything for free. It's just, that's the way that it is.
This to me just shows that the lawmakers are just refusing to admit there's medicinal uses for marijuana. They're still, in my opinion, treating it like a vice.
I think, honestly, John, I think they do have that attitude behind the scenes. I think you're absolutely right. But I think also that attitude is really what's sort of allowing them to spawn into the super capitalistic type of thing where they're like, okay, well, weed folks, you've been begging to have this for years, now we're going to give it to you. If you want it, then it's going to come at the cost of all this. And they've been watching these CNN programs out there about, how much profit's being made, yada, 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 and they've got greed in their eyes, and they're thinking, well, look, yeah, we'll go ahead and license these centers, and we'll let you have, pot places to shop at, but if you want it, it's going to come at a cost, and we're going to go ahead and make a lot of money off of that, off of you.
They want more money. They want more money so they can buy more votes. That's what they want.
I think that they've got people that are asking for this legislation that are not only giving them money, but also they're sitting there with their pockets full, waiting to make the next cannabis transport business or open up the next 1,500 plant growing facility because their buddy's on a city council somewhere, and yada, yada, yada. There's a lot of folks that want to get in on this because all they can think about is money. And, there's definitely room for people to be compensated for working hard. There's nothing wrong with fair compensation. But it's those guys out there that want to sit and do nothing and collect $1 million paychecks that I don't have the stomach for. And when you mandate this type of regulation in place, you end up taking out the compassion side of the product, and you take out the care of the product. And we're talking about a product here that is supposed to be being used for medicinal purposes. So to require that in order for it to be dispersed in a more professional-like setting other than just like through a caregiver model, it's got to go through this incredible process. I think it's asking too much. Now, some folks would say, Jeremy, you're in the Stone Ages, you need to move forward. Cannabis is going to be a highly regulated, highly industrialized type of product. And you know what? You're probably absolutely right. But I think there also has to be another end of the spectrum where patients are still able to access the medication that they need, that's been tailored, custom, cultivated for them and for their medical purposes. And when it comes to that, that's got to be done at the care of an individual, not a corporation. That's just all there is to it. When we look at the future models, I think what we're talking about here, we're talking about recreational purposes. And hey, I'll be the first to tell you, I don't have a problem with people using this adult use responsibly, for recreational purposes. I think it absolutely should be available for that. And when that time comes, then I think this type of legislation should be more seriously considered. But to, make people go through this to access that type of model now, I think that's just, it's too cumbersome. And I think really what they're doing is they're trying to set up a system here that can sort of build the foundation for that recreational regulatory model that they're looking to have in the state. And in fact, actually, if you look through the bill here, if you look at the new bill, which is the one that was introduced today, it's House Bill, what did I say that number was, John? It was like 4209. No, that's the old one.
Okay.
The new one is...
I had somebody in the driveway, I thought, so...
Oh, did you have to go shoot somebody?
No, I'd have to go take a look, make sure nobody's coming in. So.
Right. I'm kidding. But the new bill that was introduced today, the one that we want to talk about here. Let me pull this up here. Good night.
It would be good because people want to contact their representatives, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This here is it's 4827. Here we go. That's the number. You can look that up there. 4827. This is the new bill here, requiring a system to track cannabis from seed to sale. So this is actually something here. If you look at this is already happening out in states like California and in Colorado. And this was implemented in Colorado when they started their distribution system for medicinal purposes, and it has been carried on into their recreational system. So you could say, well, hey, Jeremy, you're out of line. Michigan needs to move forward in this fashion and do this. Hey, I don't disagree with the concept of moving forward. I think cannabis needs to be tested, and it needs to be professionally available, and so on and so forth, and the industry needs to grow. However, it also needs to be done with the consumer in mind, and albeit right now we're talking about patients. So patients need to be able to access their medicine, and I think that when you have this kind of process, it's going to really cumber that down. I mean, at any rate, it's a good thing that the patient and the caregiver bill that we have right now, the MMA Act that currently exists, is to run parallel along these bills. Because if this was the only option for patients, I think patients would be sorely disappointed when they go to their new state licensed distribution center and find out that they can't get anything less than $20 a gram, because that's what it's going to be. All right, but getting back here to 4827, this is the way of the future, most likely in some way, shape, or form, for commercial production facilities, where they are going to track it from seed to sale. So not only can they track and ensure that, if there's an issue with the product, they can pull it off the shelf, but also they can make sure that the growers are staying within their regulated limits for how many plants you're supposed to have, for how much you're supposed to produce, or for how much you're supposed to be transporting, or for how much you're supposed to have on the shelf, or for how much you're supposed to be transferring to their patients, for that matter. All of those things would be tracked according to this new bill, and again, that is going to come at the cost to the consumer, no doubt about it. So now I can tell you that out in Colorado, this seed to sale system, it is working. Patients are still getting their medication at decent prices, and it's also ensuring folks that aren't getting tainted medication, which I think that's a good thing. So these two bills here, 4209 and 4827, I think there's some good in them, and I think there's some bad in them, and thank goodness there's still time for us to give input on these. Like I said, they're supposed to run parallel to the current patient caregiver system, so it shouldn't affect what you guys do right now. It should not affect what the club's doing or other businesses that are out there, other operating businesses. I have not seen a section here that specifically grandfathers current centers here in Michigan, whatever you want to call them. But obviously there's quite a few places here in Genesee County, there's places all around the state. And I didn't see anything in here specifically grandfathering in the current models. I think there needs to be something regarding that as well. So there's still a lot of things here that need to be addressed in this bill package. I think that some of it is probably going to be coming down the pike, maybe not in these particular bills, maybe in another set of bills if these ones don't make it. But anyway, this was introduced. There's a summary on the state legislature that you can go and view right now, read for yourself. It's quite lengthy, so I don't want to read through it here on the podcast. But it goes into detail on both of those, and I definitely recommend you check it out, because this is stuff that your representatives are considering, and I think there's definitely things that need to be adjusted. So anyway,
that's about it.
John, what else you got going on?
Nothing here. I mean, I'm just looking at. I'm listening about the medical marijuana developments. Like you're talking about. And I just would like to see to sale thing. That scrutiny. I'm just sort of puzzled when the FDA just approved of a form of OxyContin to use upon people as young as 11 years old. They cleared that, but they're making such a big deal about a frickin' plant. I mean, that's just. I just I'm sitting there. Don't bureaucrats have anything other to do? I mean, there's stringing that gnat and swallowing the camel. I mean, it's okay to have these pharmaceuticals that could kill you or get you seriously addicted or whatever. But we're just gonna force these people because they're not corporations that can pay us big bucks to look the other way and approve a very harmful drug. I think it's a clear-cut case of corruption. And that's all it is. It's all corruption.
John, I couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, I'd like to wrap up the show here with this first part of the summary from House Bill 4209. I'll read this to you and I'll point it out when I'm done here. But this is the summary that you can go to the state's website and read for yourself. House Bill 4209, proposed substitute H1 Draft 8. It creates the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act to establish a licensing and regulation framework for medical marijuana growers, processors, secure transporters, provisioning centers, and safety compliance facilities. The regulatory framework created by the bill for marijuana draws on elements of the regulatory structure in place for alcohol under the Michigan Liquor Control Code and gaming under the Michigan Gaming Control and Revenue Act. All right, so there's a summary that the state put out for House Bill 4209. Let me cut through the verbiage there and get to the meat here, which says this act creates and establishes a licensing and regulation framework for medical marijuana growers and draws on elements in place for alcohol and Michigan gaming. What other bill out there that deals with medical draws on code from liquor and gaming.
Vices, again, they're seen it as a vice, not a legitimate, medicine.
That's right. So again, I'm not opposed to some of the concepts in these bills. The industry has got to move forward, and it's going to require regulation to do so. My issue is that currently, right now, you in the Michigan House and Senate are treating a medicinal product as a vice. John's exactly right. And that's not fair. That's discrimination, and that shows the underlying attitude by the majority of the Republican Party in the current House and Senate that they don't think this is legit. They think this is just a scheme, a lamb's wool, if you will. And I'm here to tell you that it is anything but that. There's people out there that are 100% using this at their doctor's advice and believe it. They cannot get by without it. It is purely 100% a medicinal product, and it should not be treated as a vice. Certainly should not be having laws enacted or drafted based on liquor and gaming.
Could you imagine them saying that this is a drug, like, say, for like treatment of some types of cancer, or pain associated with some kind of let's stick it to them. We're going to make sure they have to jump through more hoops. I mean, it just goes to show you that they're not taking it seriously. And I think
I'm going to ask you, John. Maybe you could answer this question for me. The folks that when there's an organ donor happening, and there's a transport person involved, right? So they're like transporting human organs being donated. Do you have to have a license for that?
Well, I got a friend who he delivers for a local pharmacy, within the Genesee County area. To my knowledge, he's not required to deliver prescriptions.
Okay, so he's not doing the organ donor thing, but he's delivering to a pharmacy.
Well, he's delivering for a pharmacy to individuals. And so if they're so concerned about these drugs getting out of hand,
he's delivering from the pharmacy to individuals. He doesn't have to have a license.
Right, but you're going to make such a big deal.
He has the ability somehow to magically carry a federally and state prohibited substance that's not prescribed to him, to somebody who is prescribed it.
Exactly.
He doesn't even have the right to hold on to that, let alone drive it.
Right. So it's like he's got a friend. What they do.
So why aren't those guys getting pulled over for trafficking?
That's my point. And I hope I don't bring some laughs and say somebody on my friend, but people like him. But
I'm not trying to pick on the guy doing his job. I'm just saying what's fair is fair, and when we talk about drafting legislation, let's be real. I mean, come on. Cannabis is certainly less harmful than what you can find at the pharmacy.
Well, the requirement too that you keep your marijuana separate, like locked things so you can't have access to it when you're in your vehicle.
I can understand not having to be accessible. We can be reasonable.
But they don't make that requirement on Vicodin, and I see Vicodin abuse around here constantly. I mean,
absolutely.
It's like basically it's like poker chips.
Right? Yeah. That law there was based on alcohol because you can't have an open intoxicant in the vehicle, which is common sense. You shouldn't. And so they wanted to have a similar law for cannabis. Well, there already is. That's what people don't realize is that you already can't have an open intoxicant in a vehicle. That's what the law says. It's not just talking about alcohol. Most folks out there, they'll think, well, what else could there be? There's a lot of stuff, believe me. But at any rate, the law says intoxicant. Anything. So you can't have anything that intoxicates you that is, accessible, open in the vehicle. Nothing.
Just like years ago.
So why did we need to have another law that specifically rules out people's medicinal cannabis?
Well, like, I know, when you look at the law, the way the law is written about drinking and driving, it doesn't necessarily say you have to be consuming an alcoholic beverage. It means cops could pull you over just drinking.
No, that's because there's a separate law for having open intoxicants in a vehicle.
But I mean, so they can actually just get you for drinking bottled water. A cop could actually legitimately, some courts, if you're just drinking anything,
That could be a distraction while driving. But having an open intoxicant in the vehicle, there's a separate law just for that. So let's say, for instance, you went to a restaurant, you had your dinner, you had your meal, maybe you had a glass of wine, and you decided, I want to take the bottle of wine home with me. That's why you can't take it home with you, is because it'd be an open intoxicant in the vehicle. You're not drunk, you're legally within your limit. The bottle's not being drank while you're driving. There's no drinking and driving going on, but because the bottle's been open, it's illegal. That's why you can't do that. And so that's what I'm saying, John, is they didn't need another law like they had passed already. And when we're talking about this legislation right here, some of this stuff is completely out of line, and I think it's quite rude.
Well, they have to have new laws because new guys become, congressmen and senators, and they got to come up with ways of getting their name out there. So they got to come up with their own legislation.
I think some of it, like I said, some of it I can understand. We got to move this thing forward. Other parts of it are just completely cumbersome, and if it's not just from being completely ignorant as a lawmaker, then it's got to be because somebody's in the back pocket. One of the two. But that's up to us to hopefully change. We need you guys to get on the phones, talk to your representatives and your senators. They're becoming back from summer vacation. They should be in office now. Hopefully your representative isn't like one of those people that just got recently caught up in one of the state scandals, because they're probably not in office right now. But if you're in Genesee County, all is well here. Our reps are keeping their noses clean for the current time being. So give them a call, tell them what you think, and hopefully we can get something done. All right, guys. I'm gonna quit rambling. I appreciate you being with me today on this hot day. Take care of yourselves. Have a great week. Enjoy the cup this weekend. Be safe, and I love you, man. See you here later on All Points TV and the Genesee County Compassion Club show. See ya.